I want to start a little bit with definitions. When we talk about the circular economy, I think a lot of people still think, oh, that's second-hand shopping or that's doing a bit of recycling. But it's so much more than that. Jessika, what is your definition of what it is and what it can be or should be?
First, I say I totally agree with you, especially here in Sweden. We think, oh, we wash our cans and we recycle, very good. But that's not the case, as your figures shows. It's much more, especially in those days of unpredictable. I think we really understand that. For me, it's of course to reach our climate goals and reach our environment goals. We need to be more circular, and then it's also coming from Europe, we need also be more competitive. And here we think it's also a part of getting Europe more competitive. So I think there's a huge opportunity also for us. And then it's also about security. Because we today we depend on other regions. That is not sustainable. We need also to take care of our own security. So I think circularity, circular economy fits into all these huge challenges that we are in the middle of. So for me, it's much more than recycling, of course, but that is also, of course, important.
Yeah, but it's a huge, wider transformation of how we do business. But just to play devil's advocate a little bit here, it's come up as a topic at probably almost every tech conference I've been to in Stockholm. I've been here for 10 years. People talking about how we can change things. The European Union has also been talking for a long time about how you're trying to make things better, but the needle hasn't really moved significantly. Why has it been a slow process so far?
I wish I had the answer. I take this example because I'm born in the early 70s, and we've been talking about this since at least then. And the EU made our first legislation when it comes to waste hierarchy. Still, the figures are absolutely not there. I was quite surprised of how the figures are actually when it comes to circularity. And
can you share some with us?
Yeah, Sweden has like 10% of our economy is like 10% circular, but that's and coming from Sweden, I also thought we are very good. No, we are not. Actually, the European figure is 12. Then you can discuss these figures because we should. But anyway, it is not good. So I'm also frustrated. The good thing of the story now is one thing that maybe now everybody cares about that, but I have it in my title, which is a very long title, but competitive circular economy. That is what I'm going to focus on. And I think that's a sign that we all know we need to do this for the reasons I just said. We have this in a lot of European documents now, which is our steering, and that is good. And I hope, together with all these on the panel also, we have the momentum to actually do things together with the industry, with the consumers and everybody. But yes, I am also not happy with the figures.
Okay, so we're starting from a low point. Let's hear from one of the companies that is a bit of a hero in the circularity space. Tell us a little bit more about Aquafil. You've worked with big brands, you work in the textile industry, and you've had circularity at your core from the beginning, rather than trying to shift the model, which I think is the challenge for a lot of businesses today.
Yes, Aquafil is a company making synthetic fibers and polymers, but in particular our heart is beating for one of them, which is nylon 6 or polyamide 6. Why? Because this has a lot of good characteristics, and one of them is the fact that can be chemically recycled in a good manner. So practically we go around the world, also from this area. We are collecting fishing nets, for example, from all the Scandinavian countries through a company called Nofjord, based in Norway. Then we take these fishing nets back, and then through a process that is bringing the waste into its previous chemical stage, we can repeat any kind of nylon products infinitely. So from a fishing net or from nylon waste coming from carpets or textile waste or whatever, we can make a new product, like a carpet. From the carpet we can make a fabric that can go to Prada, Gucci, Stella McCartney or many other, or H&M. H&M is has been and is one of our customers, in fact. And I mean, if they give us back the nylon, we return again to give them new nylon. It's very challenging because, of course, the world is not made to take back products, but who knows? Step by step we can go also in this direction.
Okay, so that's how you complete the loop. Jonathan, tell us a little bit more about what GS1 does and how you fit into the circular economy situation.
Thank you. So, and as you mentioned, GS1 Sweden, we're part of a global GS1 organization. And what we do is we're a global, neutral, user-driven, and not-for-profit organization. And we develop and implement global standards that enable companies to drive efficiency, resilience, and traceability in their value chains. We're not super well known, but I'm 100% certain that practically all of you engage with us almost daily. Because every time you go to a store and it goes beep in the cashier, GS1 standards are in action.
Thank you.
Now, circularity needs traceability. And companies need to start turning on the light switch in their value chain. They need to look up what's happening before their product and after. And when you do that, you need to digitalize your value chain. And you will generate massive amounts of data. And that's where standard comes into play. Standards will help you simplify and efficiently gather high-quality data. So that's what we do, and that's our contribution to circularity. We're a tool for companies and industry to drive traceability.
Okay, so some examples of organisations working to improve circularity. Going back to the EU level, you've been quite instrumental, Jessika, in the foundation of this new Circularity Act. So tell us a little bit about this. This is designed to speed up change. It's going to come in at the end of next year, 2026. How will that try and jumpstart circularity across businesses in Europe?
Well, it's one. We have a lot of legislations already, of course, that we're working with as we speak. For example, when it comes to textile waste, when it comes to plastic, and we have also targets when it comes to batteries. So, but the Circular Economy Act will be, of course, boost. My hope is that it will also boost. But I do this together with stakeholders because to get the results, I mean, as I said, we have had the legislation for a very long time, but we don't see the results. So I do think, as working with for people and businesses like you, to get the results, to see what is that legislation needs, what do we need to do.
So what will tangibly change in 2026?
Well, exactly what is, of course, is ongoing work. So I don't know. That's also why I need this year to engage. But one thing, of course, I hope to see is that it's different if I may take the critical raw materials that we really need to do the transition, and we also need to security and defense and to a lot of other things, the digital transition. There we know that we lack the materials, and we also know that the materials that we have on the secondary market is not good enough. It's more expensive than the virgin, and it's not good enough. So there I hope that we can see some results together with the industry, of course. But that is one thing. And then simplification, that is a word that all the commissioners work with now, because EU have very many rules, a lot of reporting that is hindering our competitiveness. So of course, hopefully we also can use standards, we can use legislation that streamline. And just one thing, I mean, this single market that we have, that is our jewel, 450 million people, we need to make this a real single market, because that is not the case today. And I'm certain the H&M can tell us about these 27 different market on this single market. Here I hope can see some results.
That's a political debate we don't have time for, but we will be talking a bit more about European competitiveness on a global scale a bit later. But let's just bring in H&M, one of the big industry players, and the statistics I think won't be surprising to people. The fashion industry is responsible currently for 10% of carbon emissions in Europe. H&M's model historically hasn't been about circularity, it's been about fast fashion, seasonal fashion. So what is H&M's take on this push from the EU to be more circular?
I mean, our take is that we welcome legislation in this area, and we welcome the push to actually move all the players within this industry in the right direction. You're absolutely right, historically that might have been the case, but for the last 20, 30 years, we've been transitioning into a more sustainable business model along the way. And
clearly with working with textile companies and things like Aquafil, but the main model of producing seasonal fashion isn't circular.
No, I mean, it's when it comes back to, for example, recycled material, that's the part of circularity that comes into the production of garments. But yes, but we're also, of course, looking into the more customer-facing, forward-facing circular business models. Still a small part, of course, of our business, but to see, can we tap into second-hand sales, for example, and similar solutions to move the whole business into a more circular future in all aspects. Still, of course, the big part is around the recycling and reuse of the material that we have in the garments that's out there today.
Yeah.
So,
Jessica, what do you think when you hear big corporations like H&M making these pledges, saying that they're going to change things? Do you think the needle will move in a faster way than in the last 10 years?
Yes, I think so. Both because they need to, both because the materials is not in infinite. You also talked about the 3 planets, that the globes that we will need. And also the materials is quite expensive. I mean, it's more expensive for many companies than labor. And labor, we know in Europe, is also expensive. So that is one reason. The other reason, I hope also, because we, to reach the climate goals and the environmental goals, we cannot only combating the climate change on the top of the results, we also need to start on the ground. What is the reason that we are in this situation? So that is the other reason for me also to reach our climate goals. But then also I hope and think, and when I'm a consumer myself, I have two grown-up children, of course we also ask for the companies to have sustainable products. So but we need to do this together. But my feeling, and I have a lot of contact with the fashion industry and other industries that are really committed, and I hope and I think that Europe also can be in the forefront of this, because we have the companies who want it, we have the legislation in one part, but we need more innovation, and that is closing the innovation. I mean, that is something that we will focus on.
Let's talk about some of that innovation. So, Jonathan, you've already been working with some Swedish brands, Philippa Core, for example, also Kappahl. They're investing in the circular economy to try and get ahead of new legislation, to be ahead of the curve. Tell us about that.
Yes, so being a global standard organization, we're part of many traceability projects that happens all over the world. You mentioned here in Sweden specifically, we've been working in fashion, we work in coffee, we do wood and construction products. And I think a number of learnings that we have, and actually building on what you talked about, it's there's a lot of different regulation that companies are facing when it comes to circularity and sustainability. And the one thing we need to do is make sure that, to simplify, there's so many regulations, but often they need the same sort of information or slight differences in data. So instead of looking at them all as individuals or in silos, look at them on a holistic perspective. Understand what's the total data set you need to gather and get a hold of, and look at it from that perspective. The second thing you need to do is start to simplify and drive efficiency. There's a lot of information that you need to gather, so make sure you do that in a standardized way, in an automated way. Don't try to do it manually. And I think the last one, and I think this builds on what you talked about, don't look at it as reporting. Look at it as ESG intelligence. Understand how you can drive additional value of everything, all the important traceability data you have. How can you improve your products? How can you make more resilience in your value chain? How can you get at your production better, planning better? Or how can you drive more efficiency? And that, in end, drives competitive edge.
Yeah. Julia, what are your reflections listening in on that? I mean, you've made the changes without sort of being told, you've got to do this. You've done it off your own bat. But do you think these new frameworks will encourage more companies, or do you think it's still going to be sort of a slow movement? People will only do it when they really have to.
Well, I always like to say that if we want to change, we need 3 basic things. One is legislation. Second is education. Third is eco-design. When we speak about legislation, we have to be careful, because we need good legislation, and it's not easy, so I would not like to be in the shoes of the commissioner, to be honest.
Working for the EU.
Okay. Also, we need a framework of legislation which is stable, because, of course, we need to make huge investments to change the status quo, and if the legislation is changing too frequently for us, it's impossible to cope. And then, third of all, we need to avoid over-regulation, because, of course, if we over-regulate the system, we risk to put other costs on top of something which is already difficult to be adopted, because it is more costly than, let's say, the primary materials that we are normally used to adopt in our products. So we started, honestly, because our customers, we are an ingredient company, and so we depend on customers that are buying our ingredients, and if the final demand is pushing us to develop solutions in this direction, we try to make them. And we have been lucky, because being in nylon 6, and nylon 6 has been the first molecule to be chemically recycled. Now there are others that are on the way. For example, H&M is making a lot of investments in startups or spin-off from several universities because, of course, they desperately need solutions. They are buyers, they are not producers. So it's on our shoulder to try, of course, to give them solutions. So legislation is an important factor, very important.
You mentioned the role of industry, though, too, startups. Obviously, clearly, this is a tech conference, so people are going to be wanting to know, well, what role can tech play in this? How can that potentially bring us forward? Jonathan, what are your perspectives on that?
Well, I think tech will play a key role, and AI will play a key role in this. In circularity and driving traceability, you will generate massive amounts of data. I think there's a very strong connection between a clear brand owner, standards, and a tech solution provider. Those three together create a good, strong bond. You can generate and share data in an efficient way through standards. You have a tech company gathering all that data, using AI to drive insights on what that can mean. And then you have a brand owner who takes those insights into strategy, planning, and execution, driving competitive edge of that company. So
Marcus?
tech will play a key role in this.
Yeah, where do you stand on that?
I mean, it's similar. And first, I mean, I just want to say thank you to Julia. You're using all the messaging that I've been preparing for this panel and doing it for me, and I appreciate that a lot. But going back to what you said around the fact of not being forced to do these changes, and I recognize a lot from our history in that we actually celebrated 20 years of sustainability reporting a few years ago. So we've been doing all this before it was mandatory, trying to push this. And as Julia was saying, we are investing quite heavily in startups, we are joint ventures and similar to get this technology in place. Because if we want to do the shift when it comes to materials, we need technology that doesn't exist today. So we need this a lot. With that said, technology and AI alone cannot save us. It's also about consumer behavior. It's also about decarbonizing the production and the supply chain and all these things. So it's a combination of stuff. And sometimes it's depending on if it's a tech conference or if it's a textile conference, you try to zero in on one thing and you say, this is going to save us.
How are you specifically working to improve some of your sustainability standards? Because you haven't always got things right. There have been scandals in the press about the way labour has been carried out in factories, about whether sustainable cotton is really meeting the standards that you said it was. But I know you have been working to try and move beyond that. Can you tell us about some of the specific things you've done in the last few years?
I think that one thing that we do that, and some other businesses, but sort of the perks of being a big business is the fact that we can actually be present in a lot of places. And when we look at in the markets where our clothes are being produced, where our suppliers are, in 15 of these we have production offices, being on the ground, monitoring what's happening, following up on allegations on different mishaps, or if there's other things that's happening that we need to look into. And then we have people on the ground actually working directly with these things. We're investing. We just re-signed a global framework agreement with industry, all the global union, to make sure that workers' rights are being protected in these markets. They have the right to unionize, that salaries are being increased. So it's being big, we can be part of all these things.
Let's talk a bit more broadly. Europe is only one part of the world, and as we've been hearing at a lot of the stages over the past few days, geopolitics is clearly a big topic at the moment. We've seen the US rolling back on its sustainability practices under the new president. There's also big competition in the retail market from Asian brands like Temu and Shein, which are not known for their circularity practices. I mean, Jessika, isn't there just a danger that, well, we're doing things in Europe, but if the influences come from these other countries and if they're more competitive on price, what's that going to mean for Europe and the European economy?
You can argue like that, or you can turn it around, which I do. And I think for us in EU is more important than ever to stand on a firm world-based order and be that part that you can trust. So that is my point of view. I think EU is built on values. We have a great continent on a lot of reasons, and we need to be stable in this unpredictable world. But of course we need to protect ourselves. And one thing that we have identified, of course, is a little bit. I'm happy that you say legislation is important, of course, but sometimes we also get blamed, and we know that from different reports recently. We all talk about Draghi and Letta, that we have some not maybe over-regulated, but it's complicated, it's complex, and it's a lot of legislations that doesn't always fit. So we need to do our homework to be competitive. And I think that we have the possibility in Europe of many reasons, but we need to focus on a lot of things that comes to circularity, innovation, and things. And the other part, which you also say, is the uneven market, global market that we, of course, you act on. Of course, that is a challenge. And what EU do is like we need to be more on the governance and controlling on the products that come in. So because we will have to keep our high standards of environment and climate and other things, and we will not lower them, but we need to have a level playing field for companies. So, I mean, we had I don't know, it's 3 weeks ago, maybe 4 weeks ago, we had this e-commerce communication on what should we also focus on. And here we have legislation on the Digital Service Act and so forth. You said we need better regulation, I think, and that is something that we talked about for a long time in EU. I've been in this politics for quite a time. I think, to be critical also to myself, is also that we need to have faster legislation. That is a challenge sometimes, but I think to manage, because the world is turning so fast. But I think stick to the values and a world-based order. That is important for you, and someone needs to stick there.
And there is also an EU Commission investigation going on now into the practices of some of these companies shipping goods and and the carbon footprint connected to that, and loopholes and things like that. So we'll see how that develops. From an H&M perspective, then, I mean, you're competing for customers with a lot of these brands. You know, I know my goddaughter, she's 12. She wants to buy stuff on Temu because it's cheaper than an H&M. So what does that mean for you, the expansion of these brands targeting European customers?
Well, the fashion industry is a diverse industry, and there's a lot of different players in that. And with that said, I think what you said, Jessica, about level playing field, that's music to my ears, because we need to create a level playing field. That's what it's all about. Again, the industry is diverse. There's a lot of different players who do have a lot of different things going on. But if we create a level playing field where everyone is part of this, pulling in the same direction, I think that's going to benefit everyone.
The other aspect to this, of course, is the consumers and kind of how they're choosing to shop. And so I just wanted, we haven't got time to get into that in a very deep level, but do you think that we're going to learn to change our own consumption patterns? The last panel talked about that as well. We can sit here talking about circularity, but I mean, I buy a lot of second-hand clothes. Nothing I'm wearing today is second-hand, for example. So do you think consumers are going to get on board with this? Let's start with you, Julia.
Well, yes, of course. The problem is how to inform them correctly, because you can't pretend as a consumer to know everything about every product. You cannot be expert about textiles, about home furnishings, about automotive, about any kind of product. So it's a challenging discussion, this one. So I believe that is more on the shoulder of manufacturers and on legislators to trying, of course, to bring to the market something which is easy to understand by consumers. But nevertheless, of course, as I said, education is important on multiple levels, because when you are well educated, you have more probability to understand when someone is giving a message, whether the message is more on the greenwashing side or more, let's say, correct. And second of all, higher education means higher personal income, so more possibility to choose. If you have possibility to buy cheaper or more expensive products, you can decide maybe to buy something which is a little more expensive, but
which will last or is made of more expensive materials that have been produced in a circular way. Jonathan, would you like to jump in there?
I would say I would expand it from consumer and say all stakeholders buying something. And I think connecting back to the level playing field, having information available to make educated decisions, be that consumers, be that purchaser, be that anyone who actually buys products. And I think the digital product passport that's on its way is one way of doing that. It's enabling everyone to have more information about the products they're buying and make more conscious decisions.
Give us a bit more context for that, for people that haven't followed exactly how it's going to work.
So ESPR, or Eco Design for Sustainable Product Regulation, is a European regulation. And one of the tools in this regulation is a digital product passport. And looking forward, practically every physical product in the EU will have a digital product passport. This will on it, it will actually be a QR code that you can scan, and you will be able to see information about where it comes from, how it's been used, how to recycle it, how to repair it. And it allows everyone who interacts with that product to make an educated decision on how to use it.
And hopefully moves us away from some of those greenwashing practices where previously, up until a couple of years ago, a lot of people were saying we're completely sustainable without sharing that level of information.
It's creating a level playing field, in essence.
How is that going to impact H&M? What are you doing to inform customers in the next steps?
I mean, back to your first question around like secondhand, we're seeing, and the Swedish Trade Association, Svensk Handel, the numbers are showing that this is increasing, and it's increasing month on month. So I think we're seeing a shift in that sense. Also, quickly, as addressing Julius, expensive versus cheap, there's a study from University of Leeds saying that there's no correlation between price and quality. There's expensive stuff that's super high quality, and there's cheap that has high quality as well. So the correlation doesn't really exist in that way. And then back to this, it's going to be, again, level playing field. Super important no matter what area it is. If we all have the same sort of basis to stand on, the same basis to, if it's communication, if it's producer responsibility, if it's product safety, if it's design, if it's a level playing field, fine, then we're happy about it.
Some final words from you, Jessica.
But I do think we all need to talk about the change of mindset. I need to do that. My daughters need to do that. But we all need to do. Otherwise, we will not get the results that you and I asked for in the beginning, because I'm frustrated on the figures, as I said, and we need to do more. And of course, the manufacturers have a bigger responsibility. Of course, I have a responsibility as a policymaker, but consumers also have it, because. And of course, information is important. I'm looking forward to. We had the first eco-design forum yesterday, and that is one step ahead, of course. But also, I'm worried because a lot of this. We're talking a little bit about tech. I mean, tech will be important when it comes to recycling and sorting things, but a lot of the products that are coming into our market now is not possible to separate because they are toxic and that are not good for people and not safety. So this big. And we all have a responsibility here, but I do believe, and I came from gymnasium just before, met 400 young people, and one of my messages...
School for our international audience.
And one of my messages that, I mean, as a consumer, you also have power, and you have the responsibility also to make your choices. And I, as a policymaker, need to make also the level playing field. So we are in this together.
Yeah, it's up to all of us. All right, thank you so much to our circularity panellists, Marcus, Jessica, Jonathan, and Julio. Thank you.